What's up, world? I am Thunder Thief, and today I'm talking about track 6 on my album. We are halfway through now. This one's called Adonde. This is another one of those songs. It's a little higher energy, a little faster tempo. I definitely started with the intention of this being a little bit quicker, just having more energy, really, but also this sort of complexity and this like layering of different sounds that maybe don't belong together, but also I like the idea of having all these individual parts be able to be a part of a different song from a different genre, like each. So it's this very all over the place kind of song. And that's the inspiration behind the name Adonde. Like, I have made it a point on my last 2 albums, and I plan on doing it into the future, is having a song that's a Spanish word. And that's because the first word I ever spoke when I was a kid was leche. So it's a Spanish word, and I have such a reverence for that language and everyone who speaks it. And I'm getting pretty good. I think I've got like a 60 to 70% competency for it. And I'm very proud of that. I think being able to speak multiple languages is a rare gift that enables you to communicate with even more people in the world. And the more languages you speak, the more you can say and the more people can hear. I wanted this song to start with kind of a weird place. My buddy Jazz, who plays drums with me, and we produce stuff together, he comments a lot how it's hard to find the one on some of my songs. And I'm proud of that because I just think that's fun to fuck with people and rhythms, and a lot of the music I enjoyed listening to and like deconstructing sort of always did that. So in all of my assessing of music, I loved when you catch these little tricks. You're like, oh shit, I didn't know that did that, until you take the time to analyze it. The first thing that I wrote for this song was the synth line that you hear in the beginning. And I have that stacked eventually as it goes through, where there's a higher pitched version of that follows, so it gives it a little more clarity and presence within the song. And I only have the sort of response aspect of that riff in the top end because I wanted the call part to be a bass-centered thing, because this riff sort of occupies this area where it can kind of go like from low to like high mid or low high, whatever. And it can just go across a lot of the spectrum and have this weird sort of sentiment when there's different sounds wrapping around this singular sound. And so I made the bass synth that covers this riff, I made it sound like this. And that has this really deep techno-y kind of sound that I loved having at the bottom. And I wanted to have a electric bass part in there, like working in harmony with it, like doing a different response than what the top of the synth is doing, because you can get that boop, 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 boop. And there's a lot of space in between that. So I wanted to fill it with a poignant and aggressive sounding bass that had pick strikes and a bunch of percussive elements to it that almost makes it feel like a breakdown in like hardcore music. Like if I were to take that bass riff and put some distorted guitar doing a similar thing and some hardcore drums and stuff, like that's a pretty sick breakdown. And so I wrote this bass riff with that in mind. I love that little riff at the end too, that fill. I gotta hand it to one of my long-term friends. His name's Keone, and he actually gave me the name Thunder Thief when we were very young, and it was my gamer tag for a long time. And we used to play in this band together, and he did a riff like this on several different songs in just different keys and whatnot. And it always reminds me of playing with a band, and more specifically that band, and the types of riffs, you know, you learn each other's riffs, and me being a bass player, like I was always a supporting role in that situation. So I was often learning a lot of stuff from the guitar players. And this was just one of those riffs and fills that I always loved the way that it sounded and it felt really appropriate just to throw it in at the end of that bass riff. So with this pretty interesting level of like synth and bass stuff going on, I knew the drums had to be dancey, but maybe a little ahead of the beat. Instead of being laid back, it's a little more forward. And that is kind of hard in dance music in general. Like the groove is in the back, and pushing the beat and making it sort of be on the front side of everything gives it this like sort of pulling feeling that, I don't know, I think works like about half the time, but I still love the attempt. And these were the drums that I sketched out for it. And that consists of, you know, a pretty simple 4-on-the-floor drum beat that has this fill that happens every now and again in the song that responds to the synthesizer and just as a fun drum fill. And I liked hunting for the loop to sit on top of this that was groovy and interesting and interconnected enough to work with the programmed beats that I had. And this is just the loop that I lay on top of it. I think a lot of my drums, I think about where there's top and middle and bottom, and the top can always have the most stuff. There's just something about high frequency spectrum occupying percussion stuff that I could just throw like thing after thing after thing on top of, and it feels cool because it just feels like this wash sort of. And so laying that on top of like the pretty simple 4-on-the-floor beat that I had on top of it, I think gives it a sick groove that does push it forward. So it was cool to find a loop that I could have sit on top of the program stuff and have it still have that forward driving intention. A lot of times it's hard to find things like that when you're running through sample packs or whatever. So the break in this song is when the guitar chords finally come in. It's introduced with this reverse version of it, and God, I love reversing guitars so much. It sounds so unnatural, but it has a very different quality than reversing like a synth stab or something with a long reverb, because it's got this like finger movement and noise that just makes it sound a little creepier, a little weirder, and I'm always a fan of that kind of stuff. So I introduced the guitar chords by having them be reversed, and it sounds like this. I reverse it, glitch it out a little bit. It just has this strange quality, and I love it. And that reverse guitar introduces the chord part that I wrote for this song that sort of sits just in the front for this section. That's just the middle section of the song, but then towards the end of the track, it's supposed to sit, you know, sort of laying back a little bit to let the synth chords shine that come up a little bit. And this whole song sort of has a lot of things that progress where they are buried at one part of the mix and then they're forward in a different part of the mix. And so everything has its time to be in front of everything else. And this guitar part is pretty indicative of my style of guitar playing that I like to do for chords, which I think as a bass player, like, I can't really handle the concept of more than 2 notes at the same time when I'm playing. And obviously for guitar, you know, you want 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 to like really let the full body of the guitar sing and have a lot of body within the chords you're playing. And oftentimes I write guitar parts in 2 times. So I'll write a low guitar part and a high guitar part, and then playing it together makes the chord that I really want to hear. It does make it hard on occasion to play that entire chord with your one hand at one time, but that's okay because I have backing tracks when I play live, and either side of that chord is back there. But here's the 2 chords. I'll play them one at a time, then I'll play them together. So here is the low chord. And then here's the high chord. I was inspired by Block Party a little bit for this guitar part in general, like just the way those guys use rhythm in their guitar parts really stood out to me when I first heard them. And I thought this was a really cool way to bring that style of inspiration in. And so when you play those 2 chords together, I think the way those chords sound is very interesting because I haven't learned how to play it yet with just all 4 of those notes at the same time, just because where the higher part of that riff is in a spot that I can't really reach naturally, so I'm still working on it. But I love that idea of this guitar sort of pretending to be a singular player is really 2 different moments of playing at the same time. The last thing I wrote for this song are these synth chords that are just this long, ethereal kind of pad sound that gives a longer form voicing to the chord progression. Like this whole song, the root notes sort of fall, they're just basically 2 notes going between each other. But these synth chords change that to where it becomes a 4-chord progression. And everything else in this song is really staccato and quick moving. And I wanted these chords to have this warm blanket sort of energy that just encompassed everything and wrapped it within it. But I didn't want the song to have that warmth the whole time. I wanted it to build to it. So you feel the chords a little bit when they come in about a third of the way through the song, but then they drop out when the guitar comes in. And the second half of the song is basically just dedicated to bringing that chord energy in and sitting behind the synth. So it can be like this warm, housey anthem that the whole song was sort of alluding to. And here's what those chords sound like. And those things just sound like your typical kind of progressive house, saw, white noisy type of chords. And I love those things. I think the texture, that's amazing. And I wanted that to be the primary texture for the end of the song, to just let you feel like you reached a welcome place. This whole track is all over the place as far as feels and intentions and the instrument that's at the front of the mix. And at the end, I really like how it's just warm and familiar, and it's like you came home. So I hope you enjoy it. This is track 6 on Past Amore. This song's called Adonde.